Last year's indie hit Hades, from the incredibly talented studio Supergiant Games, continues to be the talk of the town. It is no surprise. Many outlets announced Hades as their Game of the Year 2020, and deservedly so. With a level of polish and attention to detail that doesn't need to shy away from the very best of the industry, it blew a hole into the oftentimes predictable gaming landscape. And it's such an attractive proposal too. Who doesn't want to be a hot young god hacking and slashing their way out of their father's domain against all odds, powered up by the support from other sexy divine entities? Nonetheless, I personally wasn't fully hooked until I managed to finish my first run. It is quite ironic, really. Roguelikes such as Hades aren't usually my piece of cake, and I feared that the game wouldn't be able to keep me under its spell after achieving the main goal. Turns out that the real fun began right when the repetition started to kick in. And what's best, narrative and gameplay go hand in hand to squeeze the most out of the game's formula. In your first hours, you slowly piece the puzzle together with what little crumbs of the story and the world you get between each run. And a lot of what you learn about protagonist Zagreus comes casually through dialogue with the other inhabitants of the House of Hades. And you begin to understand that he doesn't simply want to break out of his home because he has enough of his stupid father and his stupid rules, which to a certain extent is also true though. Zagreus' real objective is to fight his way through the underworld towards the surface to meet his mother Persephone. A flashback shows you how he discovers that his father Hades hid the truth from him. Nyx, Knight Incarnate, who always cared for Zagreus, is in fact not his birth mother. Suddenly, both Zagreus' and your motivation as the player become deeper, more meaningful. You both want to learn the truth and, what's more important, you both want to connect with Persephone. Now when you finally manage to beat the last boss and take your first steps on the vast winter scenery of Greece, in a clever contrast to the fiery depths of the underworld, it feels personal. Zagreus does indeed find Persephone, but as a being born in the realm of his father, he is only able to survive for a short time on the outside before he eventually returns against his will. Taken by the river Styx is what the new game over screen reads, instead of the usual "there's no escape when you die on your way up." But it just became more obvious than ever that there's truly no escape for Zagreus. So what does he decide to do now? Fight to reach her again. And again. And again. It is exactly here when the game starts to show its true colors. The repeated runs now reveal themselves as both a metaphor and the means for establishing relationships with other people. Even if you don't succeed, every time you come back home, you'll find many of Zagreus' acquaintances to talk to. Well, that's how video game NPCs work. You do something and that triggers new dialogue, is what you might think right now. And of course, that's true, but Hades' repetitive nature always takes you back to get closer with these characters, and the humongous volume of conversation options creates the illusion that you keep chatting with actual people. It's all about the friends you make along the way. You leave again for an escape attempt and, when you're back, you check in on your mates. And in Persephone's case, you quite literally go through hell to keep in contact and get to know her better. There are also a few individuals who you can only meet during an escape attempt, where you specifically have to decide to visit them when you're choosing your next chamber. Sure, they give you helpful rewards too, but it's also a conscious act of socializing, of slowly building a bridge between them and Zagreus. You'll keep exchanging stories and, at some point after gaining mutual trust, and learning about their problems, you might even be able to help them. You'll have to put in effort to maintain and grow these ties, but it is always worth it. A very valuable lesson, if you ask me. Hades is a game that shines the most in the long run, or I should rather say, after many runs. Mechanically, all of its systems are optimized to bring variety into your numerous trips to the surface. It incentivizes using different weapons and boons and even imposing yourself additional adverse conditions, essentially rewarding you every time you do something new. On the narrative side, you get to the game's credit roll only after you've met Persephone a total of 10 times, which is when she finally resolves to come back to the House of Hades. It does feel like a huge milestone to accomplish, but even then, you still haven't seen a large part of what the story has to offer. After his mother's return, Zagreus is officially appointed to his new job: keep escaping from the underworld to unravel its security flaws. In that way, the gods of Olympus, Persephone's original family, remain in the shadows about her whereabouts, and a potential conflict is avoided. It might seem like a couple of convenient excuses to justify the continuation of the gameplay loop, but at that point it doesn't matter anymore. You keep coming back because you want to carry on forging a bond with all of these characters, and the gameplay remains engaging while you're doing so. The fact that Hades doesn't turn into a dating sim, despite letting you get closer to pretty much everyone, is refreshing. Other characters comment on your recent failures or achievements while escaping, adapting to your own gameplay situation, but their overarching stories stick to the script. This allows for tailoring your own experience while keeping the predetermined narrative intact. Zagreus' relationships evolve the way they are supposed to, with great natural writing. Games like Fire Emblem Awakening and Fates that follow the everyone with everyone motto could learn a lesson or two. I especially enjoyed how the game handled Dusa, the severed Gorgon head in charge of the housekeeping. At the beginning, she always gets extremely nervous in Zagreus' presence, and it seems quite obvious that she has a crush on him. With time, she becomes more and more comfortable while speaking with the prince, and eventually Zagreus falls in love with her. But when he finally asks her out, she explains to him that she doesn't reciprocate the same kinds of feelings, and they agree to remain good friends forever. The game isn't simply always in service of a harem for the protagonist, and I appreciate that. There's even one instance where Zagreus asks her about her body condition, but Dusa refuses to talk about the topic and leaves. He realizes that he overstepped his boundaries and apologizes to her, after which they make up. In that sense, Hades shines a very positive light on sincere dialogue and respect for other people's feelings as integral parts to healthy relationships. Another thing that stood out to me is the evolution of Zagreus' arc reinforcing his character. He was able to repair his own family's broken connections, so now he reaches out to help others re-establish their bonds. Enacting his authority as Prince of the Underworld, such as, for example, nullifying a series of contracts, he manages to let Orpheus return to his wife Eurydice, gets Chaos and that child Nyx to talk again, and overcomes Achilles' regrets to finally reunite with his beloved Patroclus. He even nudges Megara, his ex-girlfriend and first boss to engage him in a fight to the death in every escape attempt, to get along better with their Fury sisters, the two alternative first bosses to engage him in a fight to the death in every escape attempt. Zagreus is just that kind of a guy. It is important to know that these changes don't happen overnight. First, because the passage of time in the Underworld is rather unclear, as the game loves to make evident in many of its jokey lines. But more remarkably, despite its very optimistic stance towards relationships between people, the game also understands that they are very complex of nature, and that it needs time to reflect, heal and gather courage to change things. Persephone's presence doesn't suddenly fix years, or gods know how much time, of a strained relationship between Hades and Zagreus. But so doesn't it erase all the love and gratitude Zagreus feels towards Nyx as his mother either. Of course, families in particular are a central theme of the game, and it doesn't simply put on the pink glasses and make everything look easy. Persephone knows that they won't be able to fool the Olympians forever, and therefore the big late-game quest consists of carrying out a plan to settle the differences between both parts of the divine family. It is only after getting close enough to all Olympian gods that you can finally begin with the preparations. Zagreus hands out a piece of a message to each of them, which, only combined, reveal its purpose: an invitation to a feast, all together at Hades' house. At the big event, Persephone comes forth and tells a somewhat altered version of the events that transpired, for the sake of making the reconciliation easier. After the successful reunion, ever upfront Zagreus confronts his mother about lying to the Olympians. Persephone responds with one of the game's best lines.
Zagreus, I may not be an expert, but here's what I've come to understand about how families work. At least our own. The thing is, how we speak to one another is even more important than the words we use. I think, deep down, everyone in our family knows this.
Hades' optimism for relationships is not blind. When further talking about the topic, Persephone adds,
We're stuck with one another. That any of us like each other in the slightest. It's a wonder and a blessing, I think.
In its final act, the game reflects on the challenge of being part of a family. We do not choose all our ties, and sometimes all we can do is try and act the way we think is the best for everyone. There is no escape. Zagreus is a protagonist who impersonates the goodwill in the struggle. At one point in the game, Achilles calls him the god of blood, justifying it because of his use of bloodstones as a weapon and his peculiar parentage. But I think the true reason he deserves the title is his courage and heads-on drive to tackle the hurdles of love, friendship, and in particular, of family. In the words of Hades' credit song In the Blood,